well, after a lot of blood, sweat, and, well, frankly, more blood, we finally have the CT70 looking the way I want it to after I got it performing the way I wanted to. After that first ride, I felt like it was time to actually give it the aesthetics that I wanted it to look like, because even though I'm not really a chopper kind of guy, I kind of like that chopper-esque style, and the CT70 is a perfect candidate for that. One of the best things that I like doing personally is looking through Instagram and looking at custom CT70 hashtags and accounts and just seeing all the crazy wild stuff that they're doing. This is nowhere near that, of course, but it's kind of like my closest rendition, what I was most comfortable with, and stylistically what I enjoy. So let me give you a bit closer look, and we can go over some of the things that I've done over the last couple of months. So we'll take a walk around the bike and look at things in more detail. Now, obviously you saw in that intro sequence a lot of these pieces being made, but we can go into a little bit more detail. We'll go front to back and start here with the handlebars. So previously I had kind of a flat tracker style handlebar setup, and by flat tracker style I mean I just hacked up the stock bars of the CRF over there, but that was not the best in terms of functionality. Not that these are any better, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Those old ones were much lower down and at the perfect place to hit me right square in the kneecap anytime I needed to make a turn. So those had to go, and I thought these would be much more of a traditional style of the CT70. I kind of like that style and decided to go with these ones. These ones are a bit different and not exactly more practical, because if you look at the profile here, it is a very narrow style bar. So these ones are from Bart Moto Co, and they're basically the stock CT70 style, but much narrower. This is not going to be a handling machine, that's for sure. This is definitely looks over function, but I think it looks pretty cool. Making our way back, we are looking at the pipe, and this was actually the original pipe that came on the bike when I bought it, rather than the reproduction one that I had on it previously. This was very rusty, having been sat outside for so long, and I cleaned up as much of it as I could, and there was a few spots that were not the greatest, particularly in this bottom section right here. It had a lot of rust, so I also wrapped it in a heat wrap for coverage of that rust, and again for aesthetics, to kind of give it that chopper easy rider style look. And making our way back even further, we get to the swing arm. This is a reproduction swing arm that's actually 2 inches longer. It's an extended swing arm, so I have a little bit more of a wheelbase, and the wheel sticks out right here. I think the most obvious way you can tell is the fender placement here in relation to the wheel. Now it gives it also kind of a more chopper-esque stance, so the bottom kind of squats a little bit more because the shocks are bent outward. It also adds to the comfort, surprisingly. The shocks on these are pretty stiff, and when it was with the original swing arm, they were much more perpendicular to the road, straight up and down, and it wasn't allowing for that much bounce and forgiveness or damping really in the shocks when I would go over rough parts of the road, potholes, things like that. So with it sticking out further, it gives it much more of an angle and actually allows for some damping, and it actually has more movement now that it's kind of angled out a little bit, and actually is surprisingly more comfortable. Speaking of comfort, we'll get to the seat. This is obviously an aesthetics over function. I went with a skateboard style seat. I kind of liked it. I actually did have some padding on this one because I did see quite a lot of the custom DAX hashtags with skateboard style seats with just the skateboard deck, which, can't even imagine riding that thing around. That's literally just for show bikes. Well, I would like this to be a show bike. I want it to actually be functional a little bit to some extent, and so I added this seat pad here, which is made out of a cut up yoga mat and very I don't know, upholstered, we'll say. This was actually a skateboard deck that I found free online, but it's a kid's skateboard deck, so it's actually a lot thinner. This is a 6-inch deck, which is perfect because the frame is almost exactly 6 inches right here where the seat would normally go. So it doesn't actually stick out on the profile here. It lines up pretty much perfectly with these little flanges right here just above the shock. So I feel like that's great. It gives me as much width as possible without going overboard, not looking like those 8-inch decks or anything like that where it kind of looks a little funky. Going back a little further, we're going to look at the tail end right here. Now I had a kind of full like brake light turn signal unit thing that I had sticking out here, which was pretty low profile, but didn't quite go with the rest of this. I actually wanted it to be even more low profile than it already was. So I have a whole new set of lights back here. I found this LED light, which is literally the perfect shape for this frame cut out right here, and just made a bracket with an old license plate to fit it up. And then I went with these little turn signal pods, which I had previously up in the front there. I did have to relocate the license plate and just kind of, this is literally just put on with a bolt and some sticky tape on the fender itself. I just used that existing hole and just drilled it in, and you know what, it works fine. Who cares? Besides that, not much else. I have some new hardware. I got some new engine bolts that are actual engine bolts rather than whatever was in this bike to begin with. There was a lot of washers and things and rubbing on the brake on the other side, stuff like that. So brand new engine bolts. I also got some other kind of stainless dress-up bolts for miscellaneous stuff around the bike. And I also got an adjustable kickstand. The old one was really bent and rusty, and I tried bending it back and it just didn't look the greatest. If I want to do anything crazy with the stance or the suspension, if I want to slam this thing or rake it out, even small things like adding this extension, it does change the profile and the distance from the ground. So with the adjustable kickstand, then I will be able to make any adjustment that I need to in order for it to stand on its own in a proper angle. So having shown you everything that I've done to this bike, the next thing I was going to do was take you around the block to show you a little bit more about the handling and the ergonomics, or lack thereof, but... Ow. Ooh. Come on. Good Lord. Didn't even make it out of the freaking driveway. Yeah, as you can see, this thing is still suffering from a couple of issues. Number one, it's really hard to start, and then when you do finally get it started, it won't idle at all. The only way I was able to manage it somewhat was to have the choke fully on and the throttle slightly open. So a few things to address there, but even more so than that, the other thing that I really need to address is the kickback on this. It is ridiculous. So based on that, I predict that there will be another video in the future with this bike where I address these issues, and I want to see if there's some sort of method or something I can do with the engine to help with the kickback. I think there might be a solution. So we'll see what happens next time.